Welcome to the course that will teach you how to save the world. Ooh, that's right. This is a battle of good versus evil. Let me explain. The world can be a dangerous place. The reality is that there's a lot of people out there working in the shadows, waiting to strike and inflict damage. In the digital world, we call these people black hat hackers. But that's where you come in. You get to be the superhero, flying in, fighting them off, and saving the day. Who are you? You're a cybersecurity expert. Your goal as a cybersecurity expert is to overpower the black hat hackers and prevent their attacks so that you and your company's digital assets are safe. And that's a big deal. Digital assets are some of the most important assets in the world these days. Assets such as private information, your website or application, your company's data and trade secrets. That's why companies all over the world are hiring cybersecurity experts. And they're paying them top dollars. Companies and governments need superheroes to fight off the hackers. They need you. And Alexa is here to teach you so that you can become a cybersecurity expert. Picture him as a wise mentor that every superhero has in the movies. He's the Splinter to the Ninja Turtles, the Obi-Wan Kenobi to Luke Skywalker. Alexa is a cybersecurity expert and pen tester with years of experience working for private companies and governments to analyze, test, and improve their security. This course starts with the fundamentals of cybersecurity and vulnerabilities, which will be the origin of your superhero story. We then dive deep into advanced topics including endpoint security, network security, online anonymity and privacy, and even case studies of some of the biggest, scariest hacks in history. And you're going to learn how to use all the practical tools as well, from monitoring software to antivirus and firewalls. Cybersecurity is an extremely in-demand skill, and this course is going to teach you it all. That means there's a lot for you to learn here, but nothing worth doing comes easy. And saving the world. Sounds like a worthwhile and exciting thing to do.
Okay, there is a big topic ahead of us, and it's important that before we dive into it, we briefly explain what cybersecurity is. So, how can we define it in, let's say, only one sentence? Well, we can say cybersecurity allows us to protect assets, usually digital assets. Now, don't worry about this term asset. We will talk about what that is in more details later on in the course. For now, we can just imagine it as protecting anything of value to us. This can be anything from our private and personal information, to our website or application, to our entire company's data and business plan. Cybersecurity's goal is to protect all of that. Now, in an ideal world, there is no need for cybersecurity because every person is good and won't use anything for bad cause. But in reality, there are a lot of people just waiting to inflict damage to others, and in digital world, we call those people black hat hackers. Now, their motives can be different as to why they perform malicious attacks, and we will talk about hackers and their motives later in the course, but a goal of a cybersecurity expert is to always overpower the black hat hacker and prevent any type of attack that they run. This is of course not easy, and it takes years and years of learning to truly master the aspect of cybersecurity. Not to mention the constant technology evolving and the need to update knowledge and tools all the time. Now, security is a very broad and wide area, since it applies to pretty much everything. It can apply to your personal computer or device security, your network security, mobile phone security, server security, application security, and many more. Even these 5 things that I just mentioned can also be narrowed down and split. For example, mobile security can go into Android and iOS security. Website application security can narrow down depending on the technology on which that website is built, and the same applies to all the other things as well. Anyways, you get the point. There is a lot of work ahead of us, and after this course, you will have a pretty good knowledge of cybersecurity in general. However, it will be up to you to choose in which branch you want to further proceed with your work, since mastering security in details for everything is not possible. Luckily, things get a little bit easier for us once we get a job as a security expert in some company. First thing is that most of the companies have multiple security engineers and experts working in different branches of security. Cybersecurity roles are also something that we will dive deeper into later in the course, but it's good to know that if we might lack knowledge in certain aspect of security, let's say for example in mobile security, there will probably be a colleague of ours in that company that can fill that role in. Besides that, another thing that makes our life easier is that there are many tools and softwares in existence that can help us automate security jobs that can get quite repetitive and boring after some time. These tools also allow us to perform our jobs a lot faster, and when it comes to security, speed and time are also an important factor. One of the security tools that you most likely have heard of are antiviruses and firewalls, and we will devote a lot of time to them later in the course. Now, all of this is needed because of the, as we already mentioned, black hat hackers. And by the way, the reason they are called black hat hackers is because they do malicious things. There are also good hackers called white hat hackers. Now, these black hats also have their own tools that allow them to automate the attacking process and to exploit their target with those tools. They usually exploit their target with something called a payload, which is a piece of software dropped on the target machine and is used to compromise it. The number one motive of black hat hackers is, as you might have guessed, a financial gain. But they also can perform their attacks in order to discover some sensitive information about the company, or they want to compromise as much devices as they can and add them to their zombie army or a botnet. They can achieve all of this with many methods such as delivering payloads through different exploits that target a certain vulnerability. They can also run phishing attacks which target people by tricking them into submitting private information into a fake page, or it can also trick them to download a piece of software or a Trojan that will then infect their device. The same way they have their methods of attacking, we also have our own methods of protecting ourselves from these attacks. Things like firewalls, antivirus softwares, security experts, and all the tools that they use to automate security is what prevents an attack from compromising a company and its devices. If it successfully blocks the attack, then the security plan or tactic that we are using is good. However, without all of these things that protects the company, you can see that the black hat hacker wouldn't have much of a struggle of directly attacking the important infrastructure and stealing company's data. And in the case where there is no security, the hackers compromised all of the data and the company lost all of its valuable information, while hackers got away with it. Okay, this would be most brief introduction as to what cybersecurity is and why it is needed. Now that we got that out of the way, let's dive deeper into more details about this field. Okay, so we talked about what cybersecurity is all about, but other than that, we must also mention what are the prerequisites for learning cybersecurity and getting a job in the cybersecurity field. Notice how I said field. That's right. Cybersecurity is a field and not a single job position. Matter of fact, there are multiple positions when it comes to security. All of them are focused on certain tasks. For example, we have someone covering application security, The other person can be focused on network security or network engineering so that certain parts of network are protected as much as possible. We also have people that are called ethical hackers or penetration testers. Now, they pretty much do the same thing that black hat hackers do, but they do it in order to discover vulnerabilities on the system and let the administrators know so they can patch those vulnerabilities. These are just some of the roles, and we will talk about roles in more details later in the course. Right now, we want to focus on prerequisites that you should be familiar with when it comes to security. Now, this particular course requires no prerequisites at all in order to follow, but there are certain things that are certainly a big plus and that will allow you to follow this course and learn cybersecurity much smoother. One of those things is to be familiar with networking. You want to know how networks are structured, what different types of protocols are there. You also want to be familiar with all of those protocols. You want to know, for example, what TCP is, what UDP is, or what ARP is, and many other protocols used. You at least want to know what they are and how they work. Of course, you don't need to know all of this in details, but going over it once or twice will be really helpful for the course and after it. Now, don't worry if you have no idea what this is. We will have additional resources in the course where you can read about networking in general. Another thing that someone who wants to be in cybersecurity field should know are operating systems. You want to know the structure of Windows, Linux, or Mac OS. Being familiar with all three will boost your skills and expand on which systems you can work on. Perhaps the company that hires you uses iMacs in their office, so even if you were the best security expert when it comes to Windows, for example, it won't be much of a use if entire company uses Macs. Different security measures and principles for all of those operating systems is something that we will also cover later in the course. Another thing that might be important when applying for a job are certificates. Now, even though certificates are important and they can be used to measure your skill, they're not always needed. Sometimes you can land a job without any certificate at all. Their main purpose could be when a company wants to hire someone and they can't decide who to hire. If there are two of you applying and you don't have any certificate, the company will probably choose the other person even though you might have more knowledge. Some of the most known certificates are Security Plus, Network Plus, CEH or Certified Ethical Hacker, and there are many more other than that. Now, some of the more advanced things that you want to learn along the way are, for example, programming. Even though it's not crucial to learn it, programming can boost your skills in anything you do regarding security. Knowing how to code also gives you in-depth knowledge on how things work, which then allows you to understand everything better. I would actually advise you to start learning a programming language at the same time while watching this course. Now, it is not needed at all, but it will help you a lot later, and if you decide to work in a different field, you will find it highly useful. If you are already a programmer, then you're already ahead. Great job. Another thing that you want to master along the way are the tools that we use. Tools nowadays are an important part of anyone's career. We want to automate things so we don't have to sit and waste hours and hours on something that can take a few minutes to do with appropriate tools. Same thing applies to cybersecurity. There are a bunch of tools that help us do something that we need to do, and we will cover some of those important tools. But you should never limit yourself to only using these, and you want to expand your tools collection more and more throughout your journey. And last thing that we will mention that you want to master before applying for a job is you want to focus on security for one specific thing. In other words, once learning the basics, focus on mastering, for example, cloud security, or network security, or mobile security. Whichever you find most interesting for you is the one to dive in. Okay, awesome. Don't worry if you don't have any knowledge of what we mentioned in this lecture. With time, you will learn everything. And remember, for this course, none of the previous mentioned things are needed. Most of the things we will cover with basics inside the course, but there are a few things that we won't cover at all, such as programming, since it is out of the aspect for cybersecurity. With time, you will slowly learn all of this, and I'm sure that one day you will become a really good cybersecurity expert. Nonetheless, now that we know what things are important to learn when it comes to cybersecurity, let's get straight into the next video where we will discuss different paths that you can take in this field. Okay, let's quickly talk about possible paths that you can encounter during your cybersecurity career. Now, this is not to confuse with cybersecurity job roles or positions that we will discuss in details in some future lecture. We will just mention most common paths that you should be familiar with. Now, most of the people I know that became security experts actually started in some entry-level IT positions such as help desk technician or basic level network administrator. Of course, this is not always the case, but usually it's how we start off in our journey. Once we get to exploring cybersecurity paths, we encounter these broad divisions. First, we have people called security engineers. Security engineers' main focus is to implement defense strategies into various types of systems. Similar to this is something called security architect. For this type of work, usually networking and system administration skills are something that are important. Besides system engineers, another common path is to become an incident responder. As an incident responder, your main goal is to monitor company's network and devices, and also to be able to stop the breach as soon as it happens. And a security breach is simply a company's data or company's devices getting compromised. And just so you know, even most secure platforms sometimes get a security breach, and it isn't that uncommon nowadays. Besides this, companies usually also have security consultants. Security consultants' job is to usually enhance the company's security by providing recommendations in how to strengthen different security measures. Usually knowledge of threat management, penetration testing, and knowledge of different types of systems such as operating systems is always welcome with this position. And perhaps the most interesting path that you can take, and no, I'm not saying this because I chose this one when I started, is the path of ethical hacking or penetration testing. This position is interesting because here we take a part of the intruder or the attacker in order to discover as much vulnerabilities as we can. This will then allow the company to see their weakest points and patch any vulnerabilities that they might have. For this position, good knowledge of networking, penetration testing tools, and scripting is needed. Now, these positions that we just talked about are just some of the paths that you can take. There are many others out there, and don't worry, we will talk about all of them later. Also keep in mind that if you choose one path, it doesn't mean that you can't participate or work in a different role. For example, someone doing penetration testing can also participate in incident responding, for example. A lot of cybersecurity paths and roles have many things in common. Nonetheless, let's not make this any longer. We will discuss everything in the next section where we will talk about basics of cybersecurity. Just a quick video before we dive into the basics of cybersecurity. I want to give you some of the resources that you can take a look at if you're interested in history of cybersecurity. Now, this is not something that we'll cover in this course, but I'm going to leave some of the resources that you can take a look at and read if this is something that you want to know. At this link right here is one of the places where you can read about the history of cybersecurity. Now, as you can see, it is divided by different timeline, and it gives for each decade an important thing that happened or important change when it comes to security and technology. You can read through all of this. There's not many things right here, and if you want to know even more, you can go onto this site and read about more modern history of cybersecurity. If I scroll a little bit down, here you will see the date of the first worm, the date of the first cybersecurity program, the spread of the Vienna virus, virus meet antivirus, and many other things that happened in the modern history of cybersecurity. Now, some of these attacks, breaches, worms, and viruses that actually left a big impact on the security world, we will discuss towards the end of the course, where we will discuss biggest attacks in history of internet. I believe that will be a rather interesting topic because there we'll mention some of the biggest malwares, threats, and attacks and consequences that happened after those attacks finished. Another site that you can take a look at is this one, which has this interesting image, and I wonder how many of you know what this is from. If you guess the WannaCry malware or the WannaCry ransomware that struck in 2017, you guessed correctly. More about that towards the end of the course as well. Nonetheless, I just wanted to mention some of the resources that you can read more about previous attacks and history of cybersecurity, and I will also leave even more in the article right after this video. But let's not waste any more time, and finally let's dive into the basics of cybersecurity.